All right, John, what is the most painful low appraisal story you have ever dealt with?
Oh Lord, I
Welcome
got
to the
some.
strategy room.
I have so many stories. It's almost hard to kind of remember a specific one. Um, Especially back in the day when I was practicing mortgage lending. But um, appraisals are literally a shot in the dark. With appraisal, especially sellers who decide that they want to list their and then had this great idea that in order for me to list the house, I am going to go get me an appraisal. And that's probably the most, not a very smart thing to do. Um, it, and it can really hurt them because mentally, once they, an appraisal is pretty much something that um, is an opinion of an appraiser. Okay. An opinion of one person, backed up by all information that he might get with sales that have done that have happened in the past 6 to 12 months. But it is basically an opinion of the appraiser, who is licensed, by the way, by the state of Tennessee. Now, what happens is that when someone goes and gets an appraiser prior to putting the property on the market, that appraisal will be vastly different than the actual appraisal that is done for a lender. Okay. For example, say I wanted to appraise my house. I know my house is worth $500,000. Call up some Joe Schmo appraiser from an appraisal company, and he comes out and they do an appraisal. And we tell him I just want an appraisal done, getting ready to put the house on the market. Well, he's going to come in, pull up all the comps, look at the house, walk around it, take measurements, and then he's going to appraise your home. So it comes in at 500,000. So then if I go and put the house on the market at 500,000 and I get an offer for 500,000 and the bank sends out through a appraisal management corporation, they'll send out their appraiser, which they're not even allowed to even talk to. They send the appraiser out, and that appraiser appraises it for way less. Okay, that's a problem because you've got one appraisal that was for a specific amount, and you've got another appraisal that is for a lesser amount. Well, how did you get those comps? And the comps were totally different, okay, than the original appraisal that you had done. So now you're sitting here like, okay, we want to renegotiate the sales price because the appraisal didn't come in for what the contracted sales price was. Well, that's an issue. Some appraisers think they're God, and they think that because of the way the market is, that it's overinflated. So this is what their number is, and they're not going to change it. I don't care if you send them comp after comp after comp of what's sold in the area in the last 6 to 12 months. If they don't want to change it, they're not going to change it. So um, you know, it's my number, and that's the way it's going to be. We've had several appraisers come in and tell us that um, they're not putting their license on the line for one thing. The other thing is that once that appraisal is done and it gets turned in, the lender has what's called an appraisal review department where they're going to come in and they're going to look at the appraisal and they're going to say either the value's there or the value's not there. Okay. If it is underappraised, they will contact the appraiser and say, "What is why is this? Because we're showing comps over here that this could have came in at this price when you brought it in at this price." And that's when some appraisers just say, "No, I'm just not going to change." That's when they get kicked off their list. That's one thing.
Mm.
The other thing is that a lot of appraisers to make or break a deal. That is the most aggravating thing, the most outside of a home inspection, that is the most aggravating thing is the appraisal process. Simply because that can make or break a deal. Your
It feels
client,
like holding your breath every time. Like you hold your breath when you get to the inspection, and then you hold your breath until the appraisal is done, and you're just like hoping for all hope that like it's normal. But what also sucks is that you don't know if it's above value. You don't know that information. You only know if it's within range or if it's below value.
right? Well, and the thing is that if you're representing the seller and an appraisal comes in, sometimes if it's a good appraiser, the appraiser will contact that listing agent and say, "Hey, where did you find your comps? Because I'm not pulling, I'm not seeing them. Can you send me what you use for comps in your CMA?" And most agents worth their salt if they know what they're doing. They'll send the agent the comp. Now, depending on the miles away, sometimes most of your appraisers don't like to. They like to pull things anywhere from up to 5 miles away, unless it's a special property. Then the lender will allow them to go further out. Okay, they don't like to pull any comps past 12 months. A lot of these appraisers, especially commercial appraisers, they have to go way further out because pretty much what they're selling is they're selling a commercial piece, and that commercial piece, there's nothing like it. So they have to go further out. Sometimes they have to go to a different county. For example, I've got a piece of property up in Sevierville and I don't know, I think like 8 or 10 acres, and they want over 8 million for it. And so the, you know, that's a special piece where they're going to have to go 15, 20 miles out in order to find something to even get to that. Not necessarily, they'll try to look at square footage, um, but we've got to look at the land as well. So nightmare stories on appraisers. I mean, they'll even go in and they'll especially with VA appraisers. Sometimes they'll do a title. It's called a tide tide water. It's called tide water. And what that is that they're invoking tide water on it simply because they're not sure of what about the house. They're not sure
Mhm.
about the property. They can't find enough comp for that. So when they invoke tide water, then you've got to come in and help them for comp, help try to bring that value in. Now, for example, sometimes if a property is, for example, say I listed a house for $600,000 and um, and it's well below what the actual comps in the neighborhood are. And the comps are more than what the sales price is. So they've got to come in and try to adjust the comps in order to bring it in. Sometimes you have appraisers will bring in $1,000 over the sales price. Sometimes they'll bring it in 5,000 over the sales price, or they're trying to comp it down to where they can get down to that sales price, but and they have to document very well why they're having to do what they're doing.
Right.
And so and appraisals are a very, very, very touchy thing, because what happens is that, say you have an appraisal and it says so in the purchase and sales agreement that if the appraised value does not equal the purchase and sales price, agreed upon price, there's a couple things that are going to happen. Number one, they can go back to the seller and say, "Hey, um, it didn't appraise for what it appraised, for what the sales price is. We're willing to give you the appraised value." Or two, the seller can say, "No, I have an appraisal already for this amount." They're going to have to, or three, the seller can get a third opinion on an appraisal, but it has to be on a approved list in order to be able to use that appraisal. or they can just walk away from the deal.
Hmm.
Okay,
And I think that's always the hardest. It's always the hardest part. I think getting an
that's a
appraisal beforehand is good intentioned. Um, but
that's a
like you
hard
said,
conversation to have.
it is. It is. It's good intentioned. And I feel like for very unique niche properties like 100-acre farms or like these, huge compounds that have like multiple properties on it, I think if you have a very unique property, then like getting an appraiser's opinion helps with that market navigation piece. But how would you explain the difference between an appraisal and a market analysis or a CMA? Because we use similar tactics and the same information usually that appraisers have. We have access to the same information, but we can't say this is your home's value because we're not appraisers. We call it a CMA. Like, so how would you explain that difference?
Well, a CMA is basically based off of sales that have closed in the area, as far as similar square footage or and similar um, amenities of the home. What the appraiser does is he gets into a little bit more. He gets into it deeper because he has access to for sale by owners
Mm.
close, and most of the time they will find their information from the courthouse. So, the difference between a CMA and an actual appraisal is an appraisal goes in much deeper. It goes into much deeper. Um, um, I guess you could say it goes into a much deeper description of the property than a CMA does. The CMA is just the basic stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, they both compare as far as what's listed and sold in a specific area, but the agent sometimes does not have access to how far they can go out. Okay. Uh, like, for example, when you're talking about a niche property, um, most appraiser, most agents, when they do a CMA, they're only going off of what have sold in the immediate area. Okay. They don't know that they can go 3, 4, 5, 10 miles out, but they can't explain why they're having to do what they're doing, um, like an appraiser does.
Hmm.
They go much deeper because the appraiser has the ability to go to the pull up courthouse retrieval or go to the courthouse, figure out for sale by owners. Oh, and most agents on a CMA, they only depend on what on they go through the flex program where or RPR to where it doesn't show RPR doesn't show for sale by owners.
They don't. It's so frustrating.
Right. So they have access to more programs and more software that's going to be able to allow them to get more information about a piece of property, uh, more than an actual realtor would.
Mhm.
Um, the realtor has to go by, and of course RPR, they go by RPR as well, but they don't know the intricacies and the inner workings and how deep to go as far as to find the information. Because most of the time, the hardest thing about with appraisers is they will do all of their homework online on the computer. Sometimes they'll go to the courthouse, but um, and then only maybe spend 15 minutes at the house. Yeah, because
I
they
think
will
that I
go.
think that feels really frustrating because it's like you were only here for 10 minutes. Like, what is happening?
Well, that's true. I just did a VA appraisal probably about 3 or 4 months ago, and the guy had already done his homework. He was able to pull up comps and pull up things that I wasn't able to pull up. And I met him at the house to let him in. And he was there total maybe 10, 15 minutes. He was just taking measurements, taking pictures of this, taking pictures of that, making sure there's no deferred maintenance that needed to be done. Um, and and then what it is most appraisers have anywhere from 10 to 15 days to once they accept the assignment to be able to get all their work done, do all their homework on the property, and then go out and inspect the property, lay eyes on it, take photos, and then go back and put it together and
Mhm.
uh, send it into the lender, which in turn the lender takes it and and they go through the appraisal review process. They send it to their department, and they verify everything that the appraiser has has put in his report. Sometimes they may not agree with what the appraiser put in his report. They may call him and say, "Hey, I need you to change this, need you to change that," but it's ultimately up to the appraiser whether they will do that or not. A CMA, a CMA only gives you pretty much a snapshot of what has sold in the immediate area or around the subject property, and that's all it does. It just gives the agent a snapshot and kind of gives them an idea. And for example, I don't do CMA. The reason why I don't do CMAs is because I've been in the business long enough to where I can literally walk into a house, and it's something that you learn over time. Okay,
But it's
uh,
unexplainable.
right? It's unexplainable. You learn it over time. I can walk into a house and tell you exactly what you're going to get out of it, and the seller will say no. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'll go on down the road. Um, and they'll list the house with somebody else that said, hey, yeah, we'll give you what the realtors will take a listing because they feel the need to take the listing to up their numbers. Okay. And they will turn around and and agree with whatever the seller says. And all of a sudden the seller sits on the market for 30, 60, 90, 180 days. Okay.
Mhm.
Why didn't you sell my house? Well, we've done all the marketing and everything. We need to, get it done. Well, why didn't you tell me that in the beginning? Because I wouldn't have got the listing. If they were honest, they would have said, I would believe the house is overpriced. I can't begin to tell you how many agents that I've talked to that I've called up and said, hey, where do we stand on this? Well, we know the house is overpriced. Then why did you list it at that? Well, that's what the seller wanted. And I'm like, okay, do you realize that you just made yourself look like a moron? So, I mean, come on. If you've been in this business 10, 15 years, a new agent I can probably understand. But if you've been in the business for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you know better. Okay?
Yeah. I
Get
actually
some
stopped doing
time.
CMAs as well. But I still provide a document that educates the seller on I call it a pricing strategy. And there is like a CMA included in that, but really what I do is look at the market as a whole because from my background of having that business degree, we learned in order to be successful in sales, you have to understand who you're selling to and like what their behavior is. So that's how I started approaching that pricing discussion with potential sellers. So I provide a pricing strategy and I'm like, okay, before we even talk about your property, we have to see what is actually happening in the market right now. So I will pull for whatever zip code it is, I will pull whatever is happening in that zip code, active, coming soon, pending, closed, whatever is going on in that market. I want to see what's happening because that gives the seller a full picture of what is happening. So it's like how many houses are on the market? Why is that important? How many are pending? Why is that important? And then so here's where the active zone is. Here's what's sold in the past. And I shortened my time frame for this market specifically because we're still in that correcting phase. It's a little more balanced now than it's not a seller's market anymore. Or at least not in some counties. It's very hyper local. But when when I'm looking at that, I'm saying, hold on, let me rephrase. My brain just left me. But I look at the market as a whole and I'm educating sellers like, where is the most activity happening? Like, is it between 200, 250? Is it between 300, 350? Where is the most buyer activity happening? And what do those houses look like? And where does your house compare based on all the things that you have done or can do to the property? And that's how I've started approaching that. And I've been able to have a lot smoother pricing conversations with sellers because I approach it that way.
Well,
And
you also,
especially for people that are timid and they're like scared and like there's an extra stressor that's outside of selling their house. That's the reason that they're selling their house. it makes it so much smoother to have that conversation when like they see the whole picture.
Yeah, you have to find out what their motivation is. Okay. Um, and you need to find out, and by having that face to face conversation with them, you want to find out what their motivation is. Is the reason why you're selling due to relocating for a job? Are you coming in and is there a family issue? You know, is this a divorce, relocation, or you're moving to close to the family? You just have to find out their motivation, because our job as realtors is, by finding that out, is our job is to get them where they need to be when they need to be there. Okay.
Hmm.
We previously had a house listed that we had it listed for, oh gosh, I think it was almost a year before we were able to get it sold, and we could not understand for the life of us why. And there were two other houses in the neighborhood that had pretty much the same floor plan, and we ended up selling that thing for probably $125,000 less than what another house that was a brand new build was
Hmm.
selling. And of course, that builder and that real estate company did not like us because we just got a big old hole in it. But it's the motivation of the seller that
Hmm.
finally said, you know what, we're not making any money off of it. We just got to get this payment off of it. We've already moved. We're in a different state. We just want to give, dumpster fire. And and they said, it wasn't about the it was and it actually appraised for a what more than what it actually appraised for, more than what we sold it for. But um, the it just all depends on, we all know that property's worth what someone's willing to pay for.
Hmm.
The value of real estate now is starting to pretty much. I'm not saying it's flattening out. The market has corrected itself,
Yeah.
because the pandemic are anywhere between 43 to 45%. Just
Seemingly within a year. It's insane. I saw a video online the other day, and I can't remember who the creator was that was talking about it, but he was basically talking about how in like the millennials that are coming up are supposed to be this like driving housing influx. However, because of what happened in during the pandemic and the huge increase in property value, we either have a group of older millennials that are stuck because they got into a house at the right price, and now they can't go anywhere because in order to buy that house, which is like me and my husband, we were ready to move and we were going to build on my family's land, but prices did not allow us to do that because of how quickly everything just exploded in value. And then you have this group of younger millennials and early Gen Z that are having a hard time entering in to the housing market because prices are so high. And everybody's like, "Oh, just stop drinking coffee." And I'm like, "It's more than that. Like it's more than skipping Starbucks, for every day or for however many times that you enjoy Starbucks." But that I think it's bigger than that because and it's all because of what happened during the pandemic. Like
mm-hmm.
values exploded into an unsustainable situation. And now the market's like, okay, the tsunami hit. Now the waves are evening back out. Nobody likes it.
Yeah, yeah, and people were buying properties anywhere from 25,000 up to $100,000 over asking price,
Over
and
appraised value.
yeah, over appraised value, and also, and they were paying that, just to, and they wanted that freedom. Is what they were doing. They were getting away from the issues of where they were at, and coming to a state where um, everybody wanted freedom and being able to not have to do the things that they were required to do in where they were living at. And so, which drove the value up. Now the problem is that um, they're not able to they come in here, they stay here for a couple of years, and all of a sudden life happens, and they've got a relocation or a divorce or whatever, and they're literally losing money because they're not able to because they overpaid for profit. And that's where appraisers kind of came in and started dictating a lot of things because they knew that the properties were overinflated. So when they come in and do their and of course the appraisal restrictions were somewhat lifted, but they had to up that even though they were using comps that had sold in the very during the pandemic. Now that everything's leveling out, now that and they some appraisers have been trying to downplay some of the pricing in order to get the market to correct itself. So I mean, you have some very good appraisers out there, and then you have some real scumbags for appraisers that are out there. But um, it all depends on who you use and how strong it is. That's the reason why we need to really concentrate. For me, I used to be able to walk into a house and say, "You're going to get this number for it," and they'll say, "Yeah, okay," and they'll go talk to somebody else. They'll take that listing and I'll see where they went with that other agent. They end up calling me back after the agent is after it has expired, or they just got ticked off their agent. Says, "You know what? You're fired," and they'll call
Hmm.
me up and say, "Hey, should have listened to you in the first place." Yeah, that's where experience, knowledge, and time under your belt comes from. That's the
Hmm.
reason why I have a broker's license. That's the reason why I have a GRI and a master GRI, because I have got the education and the knowledge and the experience under my belt to help me to walk in and say, "Here you go." Plus, I've also done a ton of home inspections, so I know what to look for when you go visit a house and put it on the market, and you're walking around looking at things. You also have to look at the maintenance on it. What's the maintenance upkept? Okay, uh,
Hmm.
are there you want to look at the ceilings, you want to look at the floors, you want to look at the foundation, you want to look at how old the HVAC is, you want to look at all these mitigating circumstances and things that everybody else is going to see because and you walk in and sit down to the seller and say, "You might could get this price, but this and this has to be done to it before you can do that." And they're like, "Well, we don't have the money. You won't be able to get it. You might get close to it, but you won't get what you want." And they don't like to hear. Some people don't like to hear that because people think that their house is a castle.
Hmm.
Okay, their house is gold. It's just like people from out west who sell their houses for 3 times what they're worth and come over here and think they can, buy something so cheap. And we're a bunch of booger eating morons from the hills. We don't know any better, so they're going to pretty much just lowball us. We know what we want. We know what things are worth. We're not a bunch of bumpkins that don't know anything. Um, so, but you've got to be able to differentiate yourself from different people or different realtors because that's important. And you have to have an air of confidence about you to be able to have that conversation with a seller and tell them what they don't want to hear sometimes.
Hmm.
And it ends up once that happens, and that agent gets that listing and they've charging them all this money for that listing and they sell the house for what I told them they were going to be able to get at. And then and people are very prideful, okay, because they won't come back to you when they realize, man, you were right, I should have done it in the first place. I have a client. We've had a client before that we had his house listed for almost a year, and he bought it during the pandemic, paid over paid 50 grand over what they were asking, and so in order to get the house, and ended up wanting to sell it because he had this great, really nice room off the back of the house. Well, that wasn't worth that price.
Hmm.
Um, we got an offer. They came in, did a home inspection. The roof needed to be done. So all this other stuff, there's some things that needed to be done. They went and got their prices. Came back and said, well, we want we're taking the price of the roof off of our offer. Well, they didn't want to do that. Okay, and they're kicking it, and we told them. You need to do this. You need to take this. You need to take this. Well, I've got an appraisal for $495. I'm like, so number one, that appraisal was for a HELOC, and
Mhm.
that appraisal might have been a little bit different. But we put it on there for what he wanted. We ended up selling the house for probably about 70, $80,000 less than what he wanted to sell it for. And I'm like, dude, I'm sorry, you won't listen to us. You wouldn't
Mhm.
listen.
I think that's the most frustrating thing. I have this intuition, and as a person who has been in the industry, not me, you have been in the industry for over 20 years. I've been in the industry for almost like less than 10, almost 7, I think. Um, but I have this like sixth sense about
Mm-hmm.
where a property is going to sell for, at least within like 20 to $30,000. And it is so hard for me to be able to walk in and be like, you walk into a property and that number hits your brain and you're like, this is what it is. And then to not be able to explain it is like the hardest thing because you've got to justify, you've got to prove it, you've got to do all these things. And it's like, somebody just trust me.
Well, yeah, I've had and with the reputation of what this company has, I teach a lot of my agents to walk in and I show them like, this is why you're not going to get this for
Hmm.
it. And you're going to have to, don't look, I don't, three things happen when I take a listing. Okay. One, you're going to list your house with me. Two, you're not going to list your house with me. Or three, I don't want to take your listing. One of those threes is just fine with me. It doesn't matter to me because I, you're paying for the expertise, you're paying for the knowledge, you're paying for the wisdom, you're paying someone, and it's very hard for new agents when they're first starting out because they don't have a clue. Okay. But that's what my job is. My job is to teach them, show them why. Okay. Because when I go out on a listing appointment with somebody, with an agent, with one of our agents, or especially a new agent, and I'm sitting here looking at everything, I'm teaching them what to look for and what things cost. Yeah, things have gone up in cost, but I learned things in this business just in the past couple of years that, past 3, 4 years that since the pandemic that I'd never run across before in my career. So I had to learn all new things too. But like you, when you walk into a house, you pretty much know what this thing's going to go for. Okay. But if you do this, and this, okay, we'll get closer to what you're asking. But we also have to look at the numbers as well. So you want to look at the maintenance of them, and that's what the appraisers do. Appraisers will walk in. Some appraisers, they don't care as long as it's got running water, electricity, and heat. They don't care. Place, I mean, it, and they have been in houses that were rougher than a corn cob, and that if the termites stopped holding hands, it'd probably fall apart. Okay,
Hmm.
but the thing is that some of them care, some of them don't care. And then someone will say, we have deferred maintenance. That's a deal killer.
Yeah.
You got to get this done, and then I got to come all the way back out to reassess it to make sure that it was done.
Yeah.
So, and that's another frustrating thing about appraisal.
Yeah. And it's always such it's a hard hurdle to get over. It's like it's not the last one in a real estate deal because there's stuff that, there's some crazy stuff that can happen between appraisal and closing, but it feels like the last big one. You've still got some other hurdles that you have to deal with. It's not the end of the road by any means, but just getting to that appraisal, it's like, just what's your opinion on sending out a care package to appraisals? Not a care package, but like an appraisal packet. So like you send as an agent, you have a listing and the appraisals coming up on that listing and you share your comps and stuff and your information on the property with the appraiser. What's your opinion on that?
Don't not unless they contact you and to ask you because the if you're a listing agent, you can do that. Sometimes The sometimes they will call the buyer's agents. Say about 90% of the time they don't. Okay,
Hmm.
but they're going to call the listing agent. They're going to ask the
Yeah.
listing agent, "Hey, do not supply any information to them unless they contact you." And you're going to know the appraiser's name and number anyway because they're going to contact you in order to gain access to the property or to set up a time to go out to inspect it. And don't offer any information until they say, no, we can't find it. Some appraisals don't even use it. You have some appraisers that are going to use their own information no matter what. They care less because they don't care about what the realtor says or does.
That's fair.
Um,
They
to
usually
them,
don't.
because to them, they're God when it comes to, they know that they have the power to either make or break a deal. And sometimes you have an appraiser that uh, has an enormous ego, and he's going to do what he's going to do no matter what. And it doesn't matter whether you supply him with all the information feasible. Ultimately it's his decision on whether he's going to accept that or not. And the issue is that once the appraisal review board for a lender has reviewed it, and they claim that, and they think that no, our comps don't match with what you're saying. Um, the adjustments are too high, too low. Um, if they don't agree with the appraiser, they will either order another appraisal, and once that appraisal comes back and it's within their range, then that appraiser has been removed from the list. And so you have a lot of appraisers that good appraisers, uh, that know what they're doing, but you have some appraisers that just their ego is so massive that they just can't do. They
Yeah.
end up working themselves out or going to a different market.
Yeah. It's always a stressful time. It's like the quickest walkthrough. Like they will be there, like they'll schedule the appointment and they'll be there in no time. And then it's like just this waiting game to get the report and is it good? Is it bad? Is it like, do we need to renegotiate? That anxiety is so high. Um, yeah, it's
Well,
not my favorite. It's not my favorite.
the thing, well, the thing you have to look at too is that they have to go by a guideline, whether it's a government loan.
Hmm.
Now, with it being a government loan such as an FHA, VA, rural development, any kind of government loan, they have a list that they have to follow. I know that VA now has VA. They have loosened a lot of their guidelines as to what an appraiser has to look at. FHA, not so much. But if it is a non-government loan, like a conventional loan, they are more lenient as to what they can overlook and let slide. But if it's a government loan, no, they won't do that. Most of them
Yeah.
won't.
Yeah. All right. Well, like and subscribe. We do new strategy rooms every month. We have videos that get posted every week. So, John, thanks for talking appraisals with me today, and we'll see y'all soon.
Most welcome.